As I mentioned, I'm Catherine Galogli from the Domestic Policy Council, and we are so excited to have you all here today. If you all could grab your seats. It's going to be a packed house, but we are really thrilled to be kicking off this program. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Roberto Rodriguez, my boss, who's going to get us started. Roberto?
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everyone. All right. Thank you for being with us today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the White House this morning and to the first ever White House Summit on Next Generation High Schools. Yes. Today's summit builds on President Obama's vision for education that includes raising the bar to support greater opportunities for all of our nation's learners from cradle all the way through career. Over the past 7 years, our administration has been proud to support the work of school leaders across the country as they've endeavored to raise standards and expectations for students, to fulfill the promise of a great teacher for every learner, to expand, create connectivity and technology in our classrooms, and to spur innovation and promote the development and refinement of new ideas within our education system. So today we are gathered to take on the work of building next generation high schools. And the stakes today, make no mistake, couldn't be higher for our nation's children. Today our youth are preparing to compete with the rest of the world in a global contest that begins in our nation's schools and classrooms. And later in life, they'll be competing on a playing field that looks vastly different than in an industrialized era a decade or a generation ago, where their ability to innovate, to create, to become problem solvers, nimble thinkers, strong communicators and collaborators, those are those skills that will help them win the jobs of the future. And President Obama often links the work of investing, supporting, and strengthening our children's schools to our economic security. We also know that as the strongest foundation in our democracy, this work is also about building and bolstering the strength of our civic nation and measuring up to our moral imperative in a nation where every child has the opportunity to learn and reach his or her full potential regardless of the zip code in which they grow up. So today's summit is about equipping our young people for success in a world driven by innovation. It acknowledges that we need a new roadmap, a new curriculum, new designs for learning, new opportunities to connect to the ecosystem in which young people grow, develop, and thrive. We must do more to engage, to prepare, to inspire college and career-ready students. We must do more to align high school learning to employer and post-secondary needs. We know our students need deeper learning and a deeper level of knowledge and skills that will prepare them for their future. Many of our students lack exposure to learning that links their work to school and college and careers, especially in the important areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. So today, we'll also explore building new designs and opportunities for better connecting those learning experiences to those critical subjects and to bridging the real world and what's being learned in school, both inside and outside of the classroom. Today's also about challenging and changing the current high school structure and the current experience for our learners to put them on track for success. These reforms that we'll explore today incorporate personalized learning, career and college exploration, better connections with college-level coursework and credit, all in the vein of doing more to make sure that our learners are prepared for success. The work of building our next generation high schools, make no mistake, is work that each and every one of you are engaged with in some form or fashion. That's why you're with us today. We're proud and pleased to have you here. It's also work that's often done through robust partnerships with higher education, with our nonprofit sector, with businesses, with industry, and with others. So we want to celebrate and share the lessons learned across the day today. We want to mark our progress in this work around Next Generation High Schools, and we want to take stock of the work to come that will build toward a tipping point for a new day of teaching, learning, and opportunity for our youth. Thanks to your work today, I am proud to say we are well underway, and today we're celebrating a $375 million day in support of redesigning America's high schools. So we'll explore and highlight the commitments and actions that have contributed to that $375 million day throughout the course of our conversation. Let me just mention a few very quickly. They include commitments to develop and launch 100 next-generation schools serving more than 50,000 students over the next 5 years. Commitments from folks in the room like P-TECH, the New Tech Network, Silicon Schools Fund, EdWorks, and the Institute for Student Achievement. They include more than $225 million from leading education foundations in support of Next Generation High Schools, including commitments from the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. They include giving more than 600,000 students access to rigorous courses and career pathways, thanks to investments from the National Math and Science Initiative, Linked Learning, and a coalition of organizations committed to expanding dual enrollment and early college high schools. And they include expanding opportunities for engaging in STEM and in maker learning through a commitment from 14 Change the Equation companies and our nation's museums and libraries. There are many more commitments that I haven't mentioned here. They'll all be included in a fact sheet that will be available at whitehouse.gov, connected to our Next Generation High School Summit today. And now it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. John King, who is Delegated Deputy Secretary at the Department of Education. John.
Good morning, everybody. It is good to be here with all of you. I want to reflect for a few moments this morning about the significance of what it means that we are gathered here today. A little while ago, the Atlantic magazine published an article about Randolph Technical High School. And in that article, they interviewed folks from the district and teachers and students about the high school and its work to prepare students for college and careers. And the author of the article posed the question about the students in the school: has the system given up on the students, or has it saved them? Posed that question because this was a school serving a high-needs community, a high-needs population of students. And some folks have the perspective that these were students who couldn't make it. And that question struck me, because I was a kid like that, a kid folks would have thought couldn't make it. My mom passed away when I was 8 in the 4th grade. My dad when I was 12 in the 7th grade. Teachers at PS 276 in Canarsie and Mark Twain Junior High School in Coney Island saved my life. They're the reason I'm standing here today. They're the reason I became a teacher, a principal, do the work that I do. Those teachers saved my life because they didn't look at me and say, here's an African-American Latino student, a male student with a family in crisis. What chance does he have? They didn't give up on me. We can't afford to give up on any of our students. And so to me, this gathering here today is about a room of people who are coming together to stand for the principle that we don't give up on any kids, that we believe in all of our kids, we believe in their hopes and dreams, we believe in possibility. Whether kids are in a struggling community, whether kids are struggling with issues outside of school, we believe they can do it if we as a community wrap our arms around them and support them. That's what this work today is about. The article also struck me because it raised an issue that comes up a lot in education policy today, the issue of false choices. right? College or careers, academic skills or real-world skills. Do students need to build knowledge, or do they need to have critical thinking skills? Do students need to know their times tables, or do they need to be able to do math problem solving? The answer is both and. They need to be prepared for both college and careers. They need both foundational knowledge and the skills to solve real-world problems. And so the question becomes, how do we bridge that gap? How do we ensure that all students in every community have access to those both and opportunities? And there is, as Roberto said, there's a lot of encouraging news. Last year, we had the highest graduation rate we've ever had as a country at 81%, thanks to the work of people in this room. We see that the number of schools that have chronically low graduation rates have been an area of focus for this administration from the beginning, and we are making progress. We see more students pursuing advanced coursework, more students going on to college, 1 million more African American and Latino students going on to college today than before we began. The last 6.5 years has been a narrative of progress, and yet we still have nearly 1 in 5 students who don't graduate from high school. And the question is, what chance do they have? What chance do they have in the 21st century economy without even a high school diploma? So we can't say because we've made progress over the last 6.5 years, we're done. Far from it. We have more work to do. And we have to ask, who are the kids in that 19% of students who don't graduate? Who are they? Many times they are the kids that are forgotten, the English language learners, the students who are recently arrived, the students who are undocumented, the students whose families are in crisis, the students who are our disconnected youth, our students with disabilities. Often they are the students who are the afterthought in our public policy discussions. We have a discussion about public policy and we say, oh yeah, we forgot to talk about English language learners. What are we going to do about them? And so we've got to ask ourselves, if that 19%, if we want to create more possibility for them, who are the kids there, and then what will it take to create high schools that serve them? Yes, we are about redesigning high school to make it compelling and engaging and interesting for every child, but we have a moral obligation to make sure that the work that we do together serves that other 19%, that forgotten 19%. That 19% without our efforts, will not have the opportunities that they deserve. And so what would that look like? Well, part of what it would look like would be to rethink what the day is like. Too many of the students in that 19% are sitting in a classroom right now thinking to themselves, why am I here? What is this for? How will this help me? Why does this matter? We've got to ask ourselves, what would it take to engage those students? What would it take to make high school a place that is compelling, that saves their lives the way school saved mine? What would it take? It would take rethinking career and technical education. It would take the kind of work that's happening at places like P-TECH. It would take asking, how do we make career and technical education about college readiness, about career readiness, about academic skills, about real-world skills? How do we ensure that career and technical education incorporates mentoring and support services and a strong academic foundation and real-world opportunities in the workforce? As we've talked about the administration's vision for a reauthorization of the Perkins Career and Technical Education Program, that's the vision we've tried to articulate. What would it take? It would take thinking about technology in new ways. We've been talking for 20, 30 years about how technology will transform education, but technology isn't yet in enough places making school more interesting, more compelling, and more effective at equipping kids with skills. We see pockets of excellence in different places. And certainly our Investing in Innovation initiative and the work that we're doing with Future Ready has helped to support and grow those examples of excellence. But there is much more to do to ensure that technology is driving innovation at scale. What would it take? It would take asking, how do we think differently about the design of a school that serves students who are recently arrived with very limited English skills? What would it look like to create schools that help students rapidly acquire the English skills they need, and that celebrates and recognizes their native language and leverages their native language in support of their academic development? What would it take? It would take thinking about schools that reach out to the kids who've dropped out and given up and give them a reason to come back. What would it take? It would take looking at kids who are court involved and saying, because they made a mistake, we are not going to throw their lives away as a society. It would take saying, because they've made a mistake, we've got to find a way to get them a second chance that they can take advantage of. We've got to help them see what is possible in life. What would it take? It would take thinking differently about students with disabilities and figuring out how we design schools that help them to succeed just as their general education peers are succeeding. What would it take? It would take challenging discipline practices that get in the way and that foster the school-to-prison pipeline. It would take rethinking how we approach discipline to create safe and supportive environments that engage young people and that see young people who are acting out as kids in crisis that need support, not kids that we throw away. What would it take? It would take ensuring that all students have access to advanced coursework. It would take challenging the sad reality that in many of the schools that serve our largest numbers of African American and Latino students, you can't even take Algebra 2 or chemistry. What would it take? It would take allowing more students access to dual enrollment opportunities where they can start to have the college experience while they're in high school and see what is possible for them. That's why we've proposed an experimental site where students will be able to use Pell dollars to pursue dual enrollment. What would it take? It would take focusing intensely on the students who are chronically absent. And Bob Balfans, who's here, has powerful research on this. It takes saying, those students who are chronically absent, why aren't they here? And what would it take to get them back to school? What supports do they need? What access to health care or mental health services? What do we need to do to make it possible for those students to be in school, learning and thriving? What would it take? It would take asking, what happens to kids in the summer and why aren't they more occupied and engaged? And how do we combat not only summer learning loss, but the summer boredom that confronts many of our high school students who don't have anything meaningful to do? How do we find them jobs and mentoring opportunities so that they have the support they need in the summer to be successful throughout the school year? What would it take? It would take looking at issues of summer melt and asking, why is it that so many high school seniors say they're going to college, but then when you find them in the fall, they aren't there? Because there's no one to support them through the many decisions that they have to make. No one to say, hey, actually, that bill that you got, don't worry about that. You can talk to the admissions office about that. Hey, don't get overwhelmed by the number of courses to take. I'm going to help you think about which courses to prioritize. Right, what would it take? It would take all of us rejecting the many false choices in education policy, the skills versus knowledge, the career versus college. It would take rejecting those false dichotomies and saying it is about both and. It is about doing for every child what we would want done for our own. It's ensuring that they have the academic skills to succeed, that they have the love and support in their lives, to have a vision of what's possible in their future. That's what it would take to save more lives. That's why it's an honor to be with a room of people who are committed to saving students' lives, committed to the ways that school can be the foundation of a more equitable society. So thank you for what you do every day. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for the work ahead to reach that other 19%, the kids who aren't making it today, because together we can make sure that they do, and by making sure that they make it, we can make sure that our society makes it. With that, let me introduce Cecilia Munoz, the White House Director of Domestic Policy, who has exciting news for us this morning.
Thank you, John. I don't know about you, but I definitely want to live in the world of the picture that he just painted, right? John, we're so grateful for your leadership and for your vision. And good morning, everybody. It is so exciting to see all of you here. We've really been looking forward to today. This is really going to be an exciting day. But I have to say, I hope you wore comfy shoes and that you maybe had a cup of coffee this morning, because this is the most packed agenda I've ever seen. We're going to work you pretty hard today, but this is tremendously, tremendously important work. And we at the White House are so excited about it. This is an issue which rises to the very top of the president's priority list. You have heard him say, if you're paying attention at all, you've heard the First Lady say how vital education has been to their own story, to their own capacity to be doing what they're doing, and how much they want to make sure that that is available in the highest quality way to everyone in this country. It is the gateway to the middle class. It is the gateway to individual success. It is, of course, the gateway to our economic success as a nation. And we are undertaking this conversation about redesigning high schools at a time in which we've made really tremendous progress. Our graduation rate now is 81%. That's an all-time record. But very importantly, it's not just a record in the aggregate. It also reflects great progress among the groups that were falling the furthest behind. So the gap between white students and minority students is narrowing, and that's important news. And new data released today by the Alliance for Excellent Education, the America's Promise Alliance, Civic Enterprises, and the Everyone Graduates Center show that during the president's first term, the number of students who failed to graduate on time was reduced by almost a third. And since 2002, the number of high schools where 40% or more students fail to graduate on time has been cut in half, from 2,007 such high schools to about 1,040 such high schools. So that means hundreds of thousands of students who are succeeding today when a decade ago they would have fallen through the cracks. That's progress. It's tremendously important progress. It's progress that we can measure. And most importantly, it shows that the kind of change that we're seeking is possible, that we have made it happen, we have begun, we have a lot more to do. And frankly, the people who are assembled here today are among the folks that we are counting on to help do it. So this progress didn't happen by accident. It happened as a result of a lot of hard work on the part of leaders of districts, of teachers, of parents, of students committed to the change that is needed in our system to make sure that everybody is prepared to succeed in college and career. So while our graduation rate is the highest it's ever been, and it demonstrates that change is possible, it's something to be proud of, we know we can't rest because our nation still loses more than 1 million students every year who fail to graduate on time. So we know we have to do more to engage students, to inspire students, to make sure that high school is the experience that they need in order to launch successfully into college and career. And that means we need a different approach, the kind of approach that John was just talking about. So it means being willing to rethink how we're doing things and being willing to recognize that high school today still looks too much more like what high school was like in the 1950s than it should be in the 21st century. So a couple of years ago, in his State of the Union address, President Obama issued a challenge and a vision to redesign our nation's high school to better equip graduates for the needs of an innovation economy. He called for new investments in the budgets that we submit to Congress every year, encouraging school districts and their partners to rethink the high school learning experience, to prioritize innovation, to personalize learning, to engage students in project-based learning and opportunities tied to real-world experiences, and to provide them with rigorous, challenging courses aligned with college-level expectations, including allowing them to gain post-secondary credit while still in high school. You heard John talk about some of these very things. This is an effort that the president very, very much believes in, and he's traveled across the country and visited schools that are making it happen. Schools that are run in their own credit unions, that are where students are working in their own television studios, learning 3D printing, in one case tinkering with an actual airplane. It's stuff that I never got to do, and maybe some of you never got to do it. But it's stuff that today's graduates are going to need in order to be successful. And it's stuff that connects them to not just a vision of what their futures can be, but also to things which are, and activities which are larger than themselves, to connects them to the future in meaningful ways. So this vision to redesign high school is reflected in the work that many of you in this room are doing every single day with your students. We need your help to make sure that this change takes hold all across the country. You represent a critical part of the coalition of the willing that we will need to carry out this work over the next 14 months, but especially beyond the next 14 months. So we hope you have a wonderful, engaging day. As I mentioned, it is action-packed. But we hope, on behalf of my team at the Domestic Policy Council, we hope to learn from what we hear from you today. We have been here long enough to know that, to have the humility that you learn in government, that really you can be most successful if you do at least as much listening as you do talking. So we're really looking forward to learning what we're going to learn from you today. And we really hope you hear that from the Department of Education, but really across the federal government, and certainly here at the White House. You have strong partners in this effort, and we are bound and determined, again, to get as much done as we can over the next 14 months, but especially to launch work that will bear fruit long after people like me are no longer in the jobs that we're in. So thank you. I will echo John's thanks to you for the work that you've done that's brought us here today, but especially for the work ahead. And with that, I have the honor of bringing up the first panel. So please welcome my close colleague and friend, Senior Advisor to the President, Valerie Jarrett, Laureen Powell-Jobs, who's the president of the Emerson Collective, who recently committed $50 million to rethink high schools through the XQ Institute, and Ruslan Ali, our former colleague, a former Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the Department of Education, and the current CEO of the XQ Institute. And I'm going to turn things over to Ruslan to get things started. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Celia. Thank you all for being here today. Valerie, thank you for your leadership and focusing on this hugely important issue. As John mentioned, the notion of rethinking how we do high schools in this country is top of mind for all of us for very good reason. It's been frozen in time. That is the system of high schools in our country. We have a short video that talks about where we've been, where we are, and hopefully where we're going.
Teenagers have the best BS detectors on the planet. So when we say we want them to love learning, to be curious and think critically, they don't quite buy it. We actually believe ourselves when we say it. Why wouldn't we want our young people to become innovative and ethical humans? But in our hearts, we know what they've been trying to tell us for a long time. American public high school has failed to keep up. But a long time ago, public high school was a place of radical innovation. Free and accessible schooling was seen as a vital part of democracy that would guarantee equal opportunity for all. Industrialization transformed high school into a place to prepare the future workforce for new jobs in factories and large-scale farms. To ensure that everyone received fair and uniform instruction, we adopted the Carnegie Unit, which quantified learning based on the amount of time a student spends sitting in a classroom. The curriculum shifted to focus on rules, repetition, and small contained problems rather than large ones. Subjects were broken into time-based chunks signaled by a shrill bell. To prepare the teenagers of the early 20th century for factory life, we put them in a pre-factory, and that's where we've kept our teenagers ever since. In the last 100 years, as careers have moved from the industrial to the idea-driven, as global economies have risen and fallen, as women have strengthened the workforce, as the U.S. has welcomed nearly 250 million new people, as we've gone from a Model T to a Tesla and a switchboard to a smartphone, high school has stayed frozen in time. We want our students to think critically, but we make them memorize. We want intellectual curiosity, but we pad the schedule with easy courses. We want innovation, but we teach to a packet. We want self-reliance, but we force them to sit prisoner in the name of learning. Our refusal to act is costing us. America is falling behind in the world, and every year we're losing more ground. But here's the thing, we can fix this. But we have to scrap the blueprint, revolutionize this dangerously broken system, and if we do, if we can completely transform the model for public high school, we think we can change a whole lot more. If we change high school, we can change the future workforce for a complex, competitive world. We can change the poverty rate and the inequity of incarceration. We can change the broken connection between schools and communities. We can change the very building blocks of American society. If we profoundly change high school, we can reach not just the 50 million kids enrolled in public school, but the hundreds of millions who will follow them and the billions of people worldwide that they will impact. It's time to step up. It's time to rethink the model itself and truly innovate. Let's challenge the idea of bodies in seats and 500-page textbooks. Let's teach to the subject, not to the bell. Let's inspire a new kind of knowledge that's agile, creative, and endlessly relevant. Let's apply our astounding ingenuity to one of the largest public systems in the world. Let's truly reimagine what a public high school should be, partnering with the brightest talent in the country. Let's make a renewable system that works for today and tomorrow. Let's honor the beautiful promise the founders of public school made. Let's make a brave leap forward. 50 million kids need us to try. Let's build a super school.
We launched this work about 8 weeks ago, 7.5, 8 weeks ago. We knew from survey data, from talking to folks around the country, from talking with so many of you, that there was a hunger, is a hunger for change in communities everywhere. What we didn't expect is how excited and involved the general public would be. Everyday community members that want to be a part of these very otherwise wonky conversations. They want to rethink the model itself for high schools. We've seen over 15,000 people in the last 7 weeks join this movement. We've seen teams form across the country to develop models for themselves. Over 5,000 people involved in teams, 1,000 applications already forming. Yes, you better.
I know it's a conversation. When we first launched the notion of reaching out to communities to come forth and self-assemble and bring forward the design of a school that would meet the demands of the marketplace and also the needs of students living in this century. We didn't know how to calibrate how many people would actually get excited. We didn't know if there was a kind of a zeitgeist for change, and so we had to predict a little bit how many people would get excited, how many teams there would be. We had to land on how many schools we would back and fund. So just to frame your remarks, we thought if we had 200 teams across America, that would be remarkable.
By February.
So, yes, by February 1st, which is the deadline. So when Ruslan says we have over 1,000 teams, that's 5x what we thought we would have by February. So it's really actually blowing our minds a little bit in a good way.
We know that communities really have the solutions. They have the answers. They need to be informed. They need to be enlightened with the best research, the best data on system change. But what we're seeing, and Valerie, I know that you've really lived this your whole career, and that's empowering community members with information to do it for themselves and bringing together and convening otherwise unlikely allies, business, and stakeholders, students anchored in student voice is this work, and parents everywhere. What is your hope for whether this will work and your experience from the past?
Well, thank you, Ruslan, and welcome home. I'm so proud of the work that you're doing now, but I will tell you, I still miss Ruslan every day when she was the leader of our Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education. So thank you for your public service prior to your current position as well. And Laureen, thank you for everything you do, for being here today. And I have reason to be very optimistic because you're all here. And for those who are watching online, you are the empowerment of this movement. And as you heard from both Dr. King and from Cecilia Munoz, we've made tremendous progress in keeping our young people in school. Our dropout rate has gone down precipitously. But we also know that is not enough. And so our strategy really is threefold. We need to ensure that we build upon our investment in technology, the fact that every child in this country should have access to Wi-Fi and broadband, and building that out is a top priority. We have to make sure our curriculum is rigorous and exciting and offer AP classes. And the statistic that stuck out at me that I just learned actually is that 332,000 children live in counties that don't offer a single AP class
Yeah.
in calculus, calculus at all.
Yeah.
How could that be if
Yeah.
we want to be globally competitive? We have to do better, and we have to excite them. We have to make them, unleash that lifelong love of learning and that intellectual curiosity that comes from learning in a way where you can see the relevance of it. And that was, I thought, a very important point in the video. We have to connect what they're doing to motivate them to say, okay, if I do this, just imagine what I could do when I grow up. And we have to make them ready to go to college and learn and be prepared going forward. And it is within our reach. And I think your point about the folks in this room, the stakeholders involved, the teachers who we need to ensure have the training in order to excite the young people in a very relevant way, the private sector that can help us figure out what are those jobs of tomorrow, and then train people to be prepared and to be curious. All of that is within our reach. And Lauren, you look like you want to jump in and say something, so please do.
Well, you keep mentioning relevance. And in the student roundtables that we've held in cities across the country, that comes up every single time from
Tell us
students.
about the survey you did, because
Absolutely
it's
relevant
fascinating. Maybe give the audience some history on it.
This is the student roundtables for XQ. And we have to keep reminding ourselves that the current college freshmen were born the same year that Google was founded. So they've only known a world where you can actually look up anything you want to know. And so we have to really deeply question what is the absolute role of school, what is the role of a teacher. Things are changing, we have to change with them. I think the poll that you're talking about was the Univision
That's the
poll.
Univision. Yeah, tell us
yeah.
a little bit about that.
Talk about that one a little bit.
Well, it was a deep study from older young Americans, right, at 18 to 21. I think part of the most compelling data from that was one that said most, over 70% of 18 to 21-year-old Latino young people gave their high schools an A or B. Love them.
Right, very positive.
But over half of those young people that did get to college needed remediation, right? So they are paying for courses that they are not earning credit for. They are redoing high school over again. There were so many pieces of compelling data in that survey, but perhaps that stands out most to me, Lorene. It felt like they were bamboozled. Yeah, they were
Given a
so
false
hopeful,
sense of success.
so hopeful, and so ill prepared, and yet so forgiving of the system that prepared them not to be ready at this stage in their life.
Well, let's
Right.
take a step back if we could, because Lorena, having you here, my observation has been that philanthropists take a variety of different approaches in focusing on education, those who really concentrate in this space. And I grew up in a family that focused on early childhood education, and thanks to philanthropy, my mom was really able to launch the field of early childhood education beginning back in the 60s, and couldn't have done it without Irving Harris and his investment. There are other philanthropists that focus on geographic areas, close to home. Let's concentrate and have a real impact in this area. You've taken on really, kindergarten through high school in a very bold and meaningful way. Could you share how you decided to focus in this space?
In the high school space. So I started an organization called College Track about 17 years ago now, and it was very locally based. We started in East Palo Alto with an experiment really of reaching out to students who were incredibly well equipped with the brain power to make any decision in their lives, but ill-served by their local schools. So my partner and I, Carlos Watson and I, devised a wraparound services program to equip students academically, social-emotionally, and with civic and leadership skills, and really doing whatever it takes to give students who wanted to go to college and through college the tools that they needed. So this is a field and an age group that I've been working with for a long time. We've now worked with over 4,000 students. We currently have, I think, 650 students in college and another 350 who've completed college, all first in their families to do so.
And what was the reaction in the East Palo Alto school system to your philanthropy early on? Was it embraced? Were you welcomed in? Were the
Yeah,
teachers?
so East Palo Alto doesn't have a high school district, so all the students have to leave their communities to go to high school, and generally we're welcomed. Every now and then there are people who don't see the need for the extra support, and that's perfectly fine. We focus on the student and the families, and we do whatever it takes for them.
Because of course we know there's nothing wrong with the children, and that's what you alluded to.
Yeah.
They come into this world
that's
with a
right.
sparkle in their eye, and it's the adults who tend to mess things up. And so the question is, what are we as the adults going to do to level that playing field and
That's
ensure
absolutely
that in every community, including East Palo Alto, every single
Yeah.
child gets that
Yeah,
education?
so College Track has since expanded to many communities, and it's the same exact story. The students are fantastic. You know, regardless, we all know this, regardless of zip code, talent and IQ is evenly distributed. So it's up to us to make sure that opportunity is evenly distributed too.
Do you remember Andrew from last night, young person that we were speaking with at the round table? He said, we were talking about the achievement gap and the very pervasive one at the high school level, right? Is he here? Hi, how are you? I've thought about you all night and all morning, Andrew, and perhaps what you said that was most profound, so many. As we were talking about the achievement gap, and we were talking about the fact that NAEP data shows that 12th grade African American and Latino young people are reading and doing math at about the same level of white students at the end of 8th grade. We know when we look at the international data, we're not doing well by any of our kids. Most other countries are outpacing us. But Andrew said in response to that in the conversation about the achievement gap, something like, it's not an achievement gap, I think it must be an engagement gap, right? And it's about young people being involved, as you said, Valerie, engaged in the relevant education, but being involved in what they need. One that we spoke with in, it was Jackson. It was Jackson. I think it was Marissa. She said, I have a vision, right? Yes. I have a vision and I need to be heard. And high school is where I find my voice.
So many of the students have a vision, have a dream for their lives, and they tell us, you know, school is the only place that I'm actually going to find out about stuff.
Well, and that's why we have to keep them in school. And so one of the president's initiatives, Andrew, is My Brother's Keeper initiative. And the goal is to figure out how we can ensure that boys and young men of color have the opportunity to excel and compete on an even playing field. And what we're finding is by a whole series of metrics, boys and young men of color are falling behind. Quality early childhood education, whether they're reading by 3rd grade. If you're not reading by 3rd grade, the chances of your finishing high school on time go down precipitously. Suspensions and expulsions are disproportionately meted out against boys and young men of color. And so if you're not in the classroom, and so we had an event here several months ago focusing on how can we reduce the number of suspensions and expulsions, because if you miss a couple of days of school, you're behind, and how do you keep yourself excited? How do we break that school to prison pipeline? How do we revise our juvenile justice system? And now we're really spending a lot of time and effort focusing on the criminal justice system. And a big piece of that way of just totally revamping our criminal justice system is ensuring that young people stay in school. Well, it takes a lot of effort to keep them in school, and what we're talking about here today is exciting them. If we give them a good alternative and a quality education, they're going to choose that.
Yeah. Well, keeping them in school to be prepared for a world where 65% of the jobs don't even exist yet, right? When we think about what the Labor Department has told us, that our students today are entering a world in which the majority of the jobs, we don't even know what they are. You might have seen the Time magazine cover this summer that said, how high is your XQ? Because you will need to know it for your next job. We are talking about a set of skills and learning and foundation literacies that most of us have been ill-equipped to succeed in.
Well, it's interesting because for the young people in the room, this kind of passion for learning doesn't stop when you finish college or graduate school. It has to be a lifelong commitment. I was meeting with a business leader yesterday who runs a large global company, and she said one of the challenges that she's having is with her workforce thinking once they get a job, the learning stops. Well, it doesn't. You have to constantly be willing to innovate and look at the world differently and evolve. And for our workforce to learn that when they're Andrew's age is so important in order to have a lifelong ability to keep a job and keep it exciting and constantly recognize that the jobs of tomorrow haven't even been invented yet.
Well, a lot of the work that's happening around the workforce is happening in very exciting ways through nano and micro credentialing. And in the same way that we want our students to be excited and deeply engaged and have their interests drive their learning, we want the same thing for our workforce. So I actually think some of the same tools that we're going to see that are effective for the workforce are effective for students as well.
Well, and getting the private sector involved is so important. And, you know, one of our announcements today is expanding P-TECH and IBM's commitment. And I had a chance to visit P-TECH with the president maybe a couple of years ago now, and to see the curriculum, which is so exciting, and the students who are so curious, and the practical applications of what they're learning, you see why they stay in school. And so getting private employers around the country to do what IBM and others are doing and get involved, and you know what you need, you know the kinds of skills that you want your workforce to have, and so why not start when they're young and help them develop those skills, and then when they come out of school, they're prepared. They don't need the remedial education. They don't need to have instruction that's tailored to your needs. You've already told them what you need up front, and you've taught it to them in a meaningful way.
I think the president called that principal at the time the coolest principal in America.
Very cool.
That Rashid Davis, who I believe is also in the room.
He's in the room.
Where is Rashid? Come on, stand up. Take a little shout out. It was amazing.
It is.
It was, and they were having fun.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of this too. Not that every single day at work or every single day in school is fun, but there should be some excitement built into the way you teach, and you all did just a terrific job. I'm so glad you're here today. It's nice to see you again.
Now, oftentimes people say high school's too late, right? We hear that everywhere. I have so many parents and community and children themselves, right, feel like high school is too late. We know from the latest brain science that it is not. But why do we think it's taken so long for a focus on high school like this? Why do you think that is?
Oh, I'd like to hear Valerie's idea. I think that the fact is the entire trajectory is important. And I think fundamentally, all of us reject the notion that it's ever too late for anyone. That goes against everything that we believe about humans, and certainly in our country about Americans. America often favors the late bloomer, I think because we never want to give up on anybody. It's certainly my experience working with high school students that students who come into the college track program years behind in literacy and numeracy can both catch up, leapfrog, and be seriously college ready. Not every student, but then with remediation, students have a 6-year college path instead of a 4-year college path, but nevertheless, it's all possible. And we know about neuroplasticity now that in the adolescent years is as abundant and vigorous as it is in the early years. But I think that if people get more complicated as they age, and perhaps it's easier to put funding when students are a little bit younger because you want to get them on the right path right early on. But I think it's a false choice.
I agree completely with Lorene that we have to focus on the whole continuum, and I think our analysis was showing every dollar we spend on early childhood education, for example, saves you $7 down the line, so it's a good investment, but it isn't enough. If you just focus on early childhood education and then their primary and secondary education is subpar, they're going to fall behind. So yes, it's more of an effort for them to catch up if you wait until high school, but we should still do it. Just because it's harder doesn't mean we shouldn't invest in it, but if we've invested at the building blocks leading up to high school, then of course our work is much easier.
Yeah. Should we open it up?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So in our pre-chat out there, we thought we would like to open it up, and that having a conversation with just ourselves would only get us so far, but that we could hear from the experts who are out in the room. Do you have comments?
We want to model deep engagement.
Exactly, exactly. This is
I don't
engagement
want
here.
anybody to be
Questions, suggestions, best practices,
things that people are thinking
concerns.
about.
You're leaning in. If you could stand up and introduce yourself, since we're
there's a-
streaming this and people could see you.
I'm Darrell Adams, superintendent for the Coachella Valley Unified School District. In my district, our voters approved a bond to purchase an iPad for every student from preschool to high school. Do you see a day when every student in America will have their own device?
Yes.
That's beautiful, because I think that's going to change the trajectory of our country to truly compete in the worldwide stage. So thank you. I'm pushing that, and it's great to see you pushing it too.
Absolutely, absolutely. If we want to be in a world that depends and thrives and innovates based on technology, we have to prepare our
And
students.
soon, right, Valerie, every school in America will have high-speed broadband within the next couple of years.
That was in my opening remarks, a big investment that the president
Yeah.
made when he first came into office, having traveled to parts of our country where there is no access. And so you have to be able to be a part of the technological world if we're going to thrive in the future.
That's
So
the tool.
the level playing field depends on everybody having that technology.
And as you've seen in Coachella, the access, right? It's that technology is closing the opportunity and access gaps, but it can't replace great instruction or great leaders, right?
And I think furthermore, once you have the tools, we need to make sure that all students can be authors in the medium of their generation. So all students need to be able to also create content on their tools.
I'm Jody Grant with the After School Alliance. I wanted to challenge you to think even bigger. When we're really concerned about our students, the vast majority of their time is actually spent outside school. And there's a whole community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, businesses that are working in the after-school and summer learning space with schools to really challenge and get our students to the places they need to be. So when we have these discussions, when we're thinking about that next generation high school, I urge you all to look at what's happening outside school and find ways that we can intertwine that to help our students succeed.
That's a very, very good point, and I'll tell you, just because everything's local, I'm from Chicago, and Maggie Daley, who was married to Mayor Daley, created After School Matters. And I thought the name was so perfect. Her point was what happens after school matters, and how can we provide our children with enriched environments between the time they get out of school, which in some cities and states is far too early in the day. They could spend longer in school if we could afford it, and provide them with some enrichment before they get home in the evening. And you're right, I mean, you can't look at what happens in the classroom in isolation. And we need to provide the support networks and communities that don't have the enriched environment that they need. And there is a great appetite, at least my experience in Chicago, among the philanthropic and business community to invest in that period of time after school.
Yeah.
Lorraine, did you
No,
want
I
to-
love that program, After School Matters, and engaging the artist communities. And actually, in the same way that we're seeing people in communities across America get very excited about rethinking high school through XQ, we also find that in the after-school space that communities need to, and members need to be invited in and make it easy for them to either offer apprenticeships or internships or any kind of stage. And that's the kind of thing that I think the Philanthropic Center could make much easier and allow all the other civil society members to come in.
2 seconds on what you just made, and then we're going to get back to the questions. Internships are so important. One of my favorite stories is Ursula Burns, the CEO of Xerox, who had this incredible aptitude for science, but had no idea about what it would be like to actually work in the field. And so she got a summer internship at Xerox, and now she's the CEO. That foot in the door.
Fantastic.
Not that everybody's going to be the CEO, but there's nothing like that early internship experience to continue the excitement. Right down here? Sure.
So same topic. I'm Andy Rothstein from NAF, and in our career academies, we've recently announced NAF Track Certified Hiring. We have 12 companies that have said they'll provide benefits to certified NAF grads from their career academies subsequent to their high school graduation. And your question about internship is a key one to us, and I was wondering more specifically what you thought could be done, because in order to get that done, there are a number of barriers to high school students getting those internships, and I know you've just announced it's important, but what is specifically can be done to get get employers engaged to do that? Mark, we have certain strategies around that, but I'd be interested in knowing how you see that, because we see that as a game changer for our students, particularly low-income students who are not close to the major employment sectors.
Yeah, well,
How to accomplish that, I'd be
well,
interested.
so our Secretary of Education, or Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, has been very aggressive working with the private sector to encourage them to expand their internships. Most employers have them, but they might be a small program, and focusing in on like, what are the impediments to you expanding it? Is it just money? I mean, one of the areas we focused last summer was in Baltimore, and we were able to get the philanthropic community to agree to fund interns, but we weren't able fast enough to get the employers to offer them. And so you've got to oftentimes figure out how are we going to tie the funding for it, the program, make sure that they're getting a meaningful experience, which requires the businesses to make an effort. You can't just say, okay, sit in these 3 desks. You've got to actually help train them, and what are the barriers to entry. And if you have suggestions for ways that you look like you're nodding, so you do, we would be very interested in that, because let's face it, summer is a great, you talk about after school, but summer is a big downtime too, and so how do we fill that space in a meaningful way?
I think I'd like to add also 3 great models to look at. The Met and P-TECH and Cristo Rey. They all have different models, but all very interesting and effective.
Hi, my name is Shayla Adams, and I'm a teacher here in DCPS. And
Thank you.
We talked about having technology in the classroom, and while there might be computers in the classroom that don't all the time work, broadband, we have issues with that sometimes, but the biggest issue I find is students not having access to technology at home. The students asking, can I get a computer to take home, or can you help me purchase a computer, or get access to broadband or Wi-Fi at home to do the interactive and engaging assignments that we want to send students home with. So what are your thoughts on getting students access to technology, laptops, once they leave the school building?
Well, it's a continuum, of course. We need to make sure that, again, part of the level playing field is think about the kids in communities who do not have access to computers or to the connection at home versus the children with whom they are competing who have everything. And we have to figure out how to level that playing field.
The New York Public Library is doing an excellent job. They instituted an iPad lending program through all their branches in all the boroughs exactly to address this issue. And not only do they do the iPad lending, but they keep all their branches open quite late and invite students in after school so that they can start to ameliorate this. But I think libraries across the country could play a big role in solving this.
Well, there are still plenty more questions, and I'm so sorry that we've run out of time, but I just want to close the way I opened, which is to thank all of you in the audience and watching online for your engagement in this issue. I feel a level of optimism about our future that is extraordinarily bright because of the feeling and energy in this room. And I want to special thanks to Ruslan and to Lorraine for their engagement and for their willingness to participate today. Thank you all very much.
Good.